السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في كلامه المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تهنوا ولا تحزنوا وأنتم الأعلون إن كنتم مؤمنين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, our hearts are heavy with pain and grief over what is happening in Gaza. Not only in Gaza, but before that, the Uyghur Muslims in China. Before that, it was the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. And if it was not that, then it was something else here and there. As a matter of fact, from the time I remember as a young child, 7 or 8 years old, going to elementary school, it was the Iran-Iraq war. So this turmoil that we find ourselves in, and as a matter of fact, this disappointment and helplessness that we find ourselves in, Quran speaks to that. There was a similar situation with the Sahaba when they suffered a defeat in the Battle of Uhud. And I say defeat in the sense that a temporary setback, because there is no such thing as defeat for a Muslim. If he's not a winner in this world, he's definitely a winner in the hereafter. So what happened is, in the Battle of Uhud, the Muslims suffered heavy losses. So Quran comes, Allah Azza wa Jal provides them, consoles them, provides them comfort. Verse number 139 of Surah Al-Imran, Surah number 3. وَلَا تَهِنُوا, do not lose heart. That's probably the best translation I can find for you. وَلَا تَهِنُوا, do not lose heart. Because when we lose heart, you become hopeless, in the sense that you become despondent and you become lethargic and you're like, what can we do? There's nothing to do. And that is psychological defeat. And psychological defeat is worse than physical defeat. So Quran says, wala tahinu, do not lose heart. Number 2, wala tahzanu, do not be overwhelmed by grief. Grief is one thing, but to let grief overwhelm you and sorrow and sadness overwhelm you to such a point that you become inactive. And then Quran says, وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ, declares that you will have the upper hand in kuntum mu'minin, if you are believers. That's ayat 139. Ayat 140 and 141, which is the topic for today, mentions 5 reasons, or more like hikmah, wisdom, behind the Muslim ummah suffering a defeat or a setback. Reason number 1, ayat 140. وَإِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ كَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ كَرْحٌ مِثْلُهُ. If you are suffering a loss, addressing the Sahaba, think of the context after the Battle of Uhud. If you are suffering a loss, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ كَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ كَرْحٌ مِثْلُهُ. Your enemy, your opponent also suffered a similar loss. What is Quran referring to? In the Battle of Badr, how many kuffar were killed? Mushrikeen of Makkah. Not just the average disbeliever, but the cream of the crop. Abu Jahl, Umayyah ibn Khalf, Utbah, these elite, the leaders of the Mushrikeen. 70 were killed in the Battle of Badr. How many Sahaba were killed in the Battle of Uhud? 70. So Quran says, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ كَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ كَرْحٌ مِثْلُهُ. If you are suffering a loss today, O Sahaba, O believers, by losing 70 believers, then indeed your opponent has suffered a similar loss. Now I would like to expand on this a little further, because this applies not only to the Battle of Uhud, but it applies for all times. If we look at the loss that we are suffering today, and we are suffering different parts in the Muslim Ummah, right? Wherever you look, we are suffering a loss. But the opponent, the Jewish community, they have suffered a loss too. Their loss was not for 30, 40, 50 years. Their loss began in the year 70. Isa alayhi salam was lifted into the heavens in the year 33. 37 years after Isa alayhi salam left this world, in the year 70, the Roman army came and desecrated their places, destroyed Jerusalem, and killed hundreds of thousands of Jews and expelled them from Jerusalem. From the year 70, all the way to May 14th, 1948, when the state of Israel was formed. Approximately 2,000 years. If you want to be exact, 1,878 years. 1,878 years they suffered. Quran mentions their suffering. ضُرِبَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الذِّلَّةُ وَالْمَسْكَنَةُ. That humility and disgrace has been their lot. It has been slapped on them, stuck to them. Humiliation, wherever, أَيْنَمَا ثُقِفُوا, wherever they go. And Quran explains why. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَيَقْتُلُونَ النَّبِيِّينَ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ ذَلِكَ بِمَا عَصَوْا وَكَانُوا يَعْتَدُونَ. They would kill prophets. They would deny the signs of Allah. So this misery, this humiliation was slapped on them. In the last 1,000 years, not the last 1,800 and, how many years did I say? 78, 1,870. In the last 900, 1,000 years alone, they have been kicked out of 38 different countries. And even in this country, the United States of America, not too long ago, by not too long ago, I'm speaking of the early 1900s, late 1800s, you could find a sign in this country in front of a restaurant, in front of a shop that said no dogs and no Jews allowed. In this country. What happened? That's important. What happened? Well, one thing is education. They focused on what? Education. But of course, there's the divine plan of Allah Azza wa Jal. Because where Quran says, ضُرِبَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الذِّلَّةُ, that they were stuck with disgrace and humility, Quran also says that this disgrace and humility will be with them unless إِلَّا بِحَبْلٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَحَبْلٍ مِّنَ النَّاسِ. That wherever they go, there is disgrace and humility and subjugation for them unless they get a rope from Allah or they get a rope from the people. What they have right now is a rope from Allah and a rope from the people. And فَيَنْظُرْ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is watching what you are doing. O Bani Israel, O state of Israel, Allah is watching what you are doing. There was a time when you were oppressed for the past 2,000 years, and now you have become the oppressor. But there's a difference. The Muslim Ummah for the past 1,400 years did not oppress them. The most prejudiced Jewish historian, not a Muslim historian or a Christian historian, a Jewish historian, and who's not even neutral, who's not fair-minded, he's biased. He will also admit that the Jewish community for the last 1,400 years had a relatively better time, lived better lives in Muslim lands than they ever did in Christian lands. So yes, you were oppressed, no doubt. But now you have become the oppressor. Against whom? Against those who treated you well? Against those who treated you well? At times they were the ministers. You have a king, you have a Khalifa, and you have ministers. They would reach the position, they would reach ministerial positions. And it made sense. I don't want to go into a history lesson. It made sense. When you took the land from the Christians, you're not going to put a Christian in charge. Who are you going to put in charge? Educated people. And who were the educated people even back then? The Jewish people. So the Muslim Ummah army would conquer the land, and who would they make in charge as they went on? They would make a person of Jewish descent in charge. Anyhow, the point is, as Quran says, إِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ كَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ كَرْحٌ مِثْلُهُ. Sometimes we just take a slice of history and we fail to focus on the larger pie. The second reason Allah gives, or hikmah, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ, in the same ayah, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, these are days that we interchange amongst the people. The good days and the bad days. Not one ummah or community will have good days forever. Neither will the other. Your enemy will have good days forever. We will interchange. Anecdotal evidence. Who remembers when there was nothing but Kmart? There was no Walmart. Who remembers those days? What happened to Kmart? Gone. The only signs of Kmart that you see are those empty stores that were once upon a time Kmart used to own them, or once upon a time Kmart used to rent them. Now it's all Walmart. Will Walmart stay forever? No. You might say, well, Amazon has already taken its place. But وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ, Quran declares, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ, these are days that we interchange. And there is a reason for that. There is a reason for that. That is, if the Muslim Ummah had good days all the time, they were always on top, they were always victorious, then there would be no test in being a Muslim. And similarly, if the disbelievers had good times, they were victorious all the time. They were not always victorious. I'll come to that in a minute. When if the disbelievers were victorious all the time, then the Muslims would be tempted into falling into kufr. Because no one wants to be with a losing team. Everyone wants to be with what? The winning team. So these are days that Allah interchanges amongst the people. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. The Muslim Ummah was at the top of its game for the longest time ever. The Ottoman Empire lasted for 600 years. Imagine, 600 years is not a short period of time. And there was a time when all of Europe combined together with all their forces could not take on the Ottoman Empire. Right? Very similar to today. All 57 Muslim countries in the world cannot take on England or France. There was a time, yes. When did the downfall of the Muslim Ummah start? And when did their rise start? When did Europe? Let's not even talk about the United States. United States only became a superpower after World War II, just recently. Before that, Europe was dominant. And the Muslim world had to contend with Europe. They rose to power. Their dominance was established in the 1500s, their military dominance. But they started rising to power in the 1300s. Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi Rahmatullah Alayhi writes that just like it is almost impossible to pinpoint when a person went to sleep, it's a gradual process. You get sleepy, and then you fall asleep. Similarly, it is almost impossible, mustahil, to pinpoint the exact year when the downfall of the Muslim Ummah or the downfall of any nation started. You can't. It's a gradual process. But historians, they say the downfall of the Muslim Ummah started in the mid-1600s, in the 1600s. The state that we find ourselves in today is not the result of 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. It's the result of 400, 500 years. We have been going down and 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 down for the last 400 plus years. Because people say, what can we do now? We're on the surgery table. If a person is having a triple bypass because his arteries are clogged and he's in the operating theater, in the operating room, on the surgery table, and doctors are about to operate on him because his arteries are clogged, and he says, this must be from the piece of cake I had last week. Is it from the one piece of cake that he had last week? It's because he has been eating unhealthy for the last 30, 40 years that now he's on the operating table. Yes. We have dropped the ball, or have been dropping the ball for a very long time, as I said, from the 1600s. Yes. May Allah have mercy on us. But the point is, before, when you looked at the Muslim Ummah going down in one part of the world, you would see it going up in another part of the world. For example, the Muslims got kicked out of Spain in 1472. That was the fall of Granada. But that process was also, did that happen overnight? Did Muslims get kicked out of Spain overnight? Or was it a 200-year decline? They started being pushed out of Spain 200-300 years before that. But then you saw on this side, Sultan Fatih, he conquered Constantinople, and it became Islambul, the city of Islam, which is now Istanbul. In which year? 1453. So you had one region of the Muslim world suffering, but you had another gaining power. But today the difference is, all we see and what we have been seeing since we opened our eyes is the Muslim Ummah, wherever they may be, they are going down or down and down and in trouble. But Quran mentions 5 reasons. 5 reasons. We've gone through 2 so far. وَإِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ كَرْهٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ كَرْهٌ مِثْلُهُ. Second, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Same ayah. And the third reason Allah mentions, وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, so that Allah can test you to see who are the true believers. Yes. In the imtihan yukramur rajul o yuhan. At the time when the test happens, when the examination occurs, then you find out who are the true believers. And the fourth reason Allah mentions in this very same ayah, ayat 140 of Surah Al-Imran, وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. Allah wants to make you martyrs. Yes. We look at this life, which is honestly 2.5 minutes long, even if we lived 100 years, compared to 1 day of the hereafter, which is 50,000 years. This 2.5 minute life, we think this is our loss or this is our gain. The real loss and the real gain is the loss and gain of the hereafter. وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. That's why I said that the word defeat, you have to use that word with a grain of salt, because there is no such thing as defeat. If we lose in this life, at least we have the hereafter. So call it defeat, temporary defeat, or call it a setback. Here Allah mentions 5 reasons. Reason number 4, وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ, to bless you, to give you the rank of martyrdom. And then Allah mentions, وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. Allah giving the tafsir of this Allah does not love the zalim. Allah does not love the wrongdoer. The tafsir of this is that a believer should not think that the reason why Allah has given victory to the disbeliever is because He loves them. Allah loves the believer. Allah loves the believer. This believer with a mustard seed of iman in his heart is more valuable than the whole world and whatever it contains. Yes. So, Wallahu la yuhibbu 𝙁𝙊𝙇𝙊𝙒. Allah is giving them victory. Why? For these very reasons. And then the next reason, reason number 5, Allah mentions in ayat number 141, the very next ayah, is وَيَمْحَقَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And Allah gives victory to the disbeliever to destroy the disbeliever. وَيَمْحَقَ الْكَافِرِينَ. In his arrogance, in his pride, he continues to do zulm, oppression, till it reaches a point where a cry of an orphan or a cry of a widow reaches the arsh of Allah, reaches the throne of Allah and shakes the arsh of Allah. And Allah's anger comes into motion. When Allah's anger comes into motion, Allah brings down His iron hammer. And when Allah brings down His iron hammer, it smashes the iron dome. Inna batsha rabbika lashadid. We don't believe in the power of atom bomb, we believe in Allah. We don't believe in the power of F-16, we believe in the power of Allah. We don't believe in the power of the Iron Dome, we believe in the power of Allah. Yes. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. No one knows the armies of Allah except Him. Yes. But one thing is for sure, mentioned Ali radiallahu anh has said, that a society, a community, a nation can survive with kufr. Not only survive, it can thrive with kufr, with disbelief. But a society, nation cannot survive while doing zulm, injustice. Yes. Yes. Whether it is a Muslim country or community or non-Muslim, a society can survive on kufr. The whole country are disbelievers. Not only will they survive, but they will what? Thrive. But if they do zulm, if they do wrong, if they oppress, then Allah's play comes into motion. Yes. What Abraham Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, the 16th President of the United States, a country of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. There's a slight correction to that. A country of the people, by the people, for the people, shall perish from the earth if it does injustice. If it does zulm, it will perish. Yes. What can we do? Boycotts are difficult. Reaching out to our politicians is ineffective. There's a quote that I read that sometimes the living, sometimes the dead need the living to close their eyes. Right? When a person dies, a living person will close his eyes. And sometimes it takes the dead to open the eyes of the living. Sometimes it takes the dead to open the eyes of the living. What is happening should open our eyes. Yes, it should open our eyes. What can we do? How can I be a better Muslim? How can I do tawbah to Allah Azza wa Jalla and repent in front of Him? What can I do to make the Muslim Ummah stronger? How can I make my children better Muslims? May Allah Azza wa Jalla give us the tawfiq to practice what has been said and heard. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ. Please pray your sunnah.